Hey guys, welcome to Coffee with Megan, where I chat to people in the fashion industry who are using their platform for good. Today I'm talking to Aditi Mayer. Aditi is incredibly inspiring to me. She works as an activist within the fashion world, and she is a woman of many talents. She works as a photojournalist, she is a video maker, she is a content creator for her blog and Instagram, all based around sustainable fashion. And she talks about how she uses sustainable fashion as a vehicle to talk about social injustices in the world, and especially within the fashion industry and garment workers. She dives deep into what this means to her and to how she found this passion, and a lot more. And she's just so interesting and inspiring, and I really hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you. Hi, Aditi.
Hi, Megan. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay. All things considered in the state of the world, but hanging in there. How are you?
I'm doing okay too. Same. Please let the listeners know where you are calling from right now.
Yeah, today I am in Los Angeles, where I was born and raised.
Nice. And for people who don't know Aditi, how would you explain what you do, who you are? You are a woman of many talents, so how would you sum it up?
Yeah, in the most general sense, I would describe myself as a storyteller that navigates the worlds of sustainability and social justice. More specifically, I work as a sustainable fashion blogger, writing about the landscape of sustainable fashion. I work as a freelance journalist, covering issues of labor and the environment. Within all that, I also do a lot of grassroots organizing here in LA within the garment sector. So it's a lot of different things, but at its core, it's all tied to the core of style, sustainability, and social justice in some capacity.
Yeah, as I said, many talents. You've got many different areas we'll discuss. So let's go back to the beginning of your journey in the sustainable world and starting your blog. I know it was in 2014, something sparked in you after the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh. Could you tell people that may not know anything about this event, what happened, and what did this spark in you?
Yeah, most definitely. So in 2013, there was an 8-story garment factory in Bangladesh that was producing for some of the world's biggest fast fashion brands. And the day before this factory collapsed, they had actually found structural cracks in the building, and it was ordered to evacuate. But there was so much pressure from upper management to have garment workers complete orders that they were actually forced back into work the next day. And when you think about the demographic that often makes up garment workers, it's not a community or a demographic that has the luxury of forgoing a day's salary. And so they were called back to work, and the next day the factory collapsed, killing over 1,100 people. And it is literally the biggest industrial disaster of our time. For me at that time, so 2014, fast forward a few months later, I was just about to start my college career, fresh out of high school, and I always had a passion for photography, actually. So a lot of folks think I had like this passion for fashion, but it was actually photography was like my gateway into storytelling, and fashion was quickly becoming a very powerful medium for me to explore that with photography. At that time, I became familiar with the Rana Plaza factory collapse, and I never considered the fashion industry through a lens of the politics of labor and which communities are disproportionately affected, which is often people of color. And so for me, I was like, if I want to occupy a space within this fashion landscape, it needs to consider all of the human life on the supply chain. So a younger version of me started this blog at like 3 a.m., nothing special before I started college. And it was just a very organic journey of me trying to understand what a more sustainable fashion industry looks like. And fast forward, 6 years later now, and it's my full-time job and I'm in deep. So it's just one of those crazy things, and you never know what can spark that journey.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And would you say was sustainability something that was already on your mind? Is it gone back further than this? Is it something you grew up with, or was it just a sudden spark and a change in your life then?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, I was never someone that had like this natural inclination for the outdoors or anything like that. So I used to think that like entering the fashion and sustainable fashion world was my gateway into sustainability. But now having been in the space for as long as I have, I've realized that sustainability was always a part of my lifestyle in a way that I didn't really recognize it. And by that, I mean, I am the child of immigrants. My ancestry traces back to Punjab in India, where my grandparents were farmers. And so there's always been an inherent connection to the land. I remember like I had a lot of precious moments when I was in high school when my grandparents actually lived with me in their later years, of them taking every seed of any fruit that we would eat, plant it. Now I have like all these pomegranate trees and like guava trees in the back. This idea of stewardship of the land, I think, was something that was ingrained in me culturally. And I think being an immigrant, especially coming from a low income family, there was this idea of frugality, reusing what you have. And so now at this point, I've come to realize how before sustainability was marketed to me as something I can buy in the fashion landscape, it was actually a lifestyle. And I think that's something that has deeply informed my work, is more than sustainability being anything you could buy, it's a lifestyle for one, but it's also an unlearning of capitalistic values. It's a return to ancestral wisdom and knowledge, which I'm very, very proud to say that I come from a lineage that has been so connected to the land. And so sustainability in a lot of ways is just reconnecting to my roots in that way.
And I think many of us, I don't know how many people have put themselves in a situation to experience it, but when you are really connected with the land and the way we're meant to live, it just feels right. I mean, I know I've put myself recently in many more situations like that, where we've been camping or been just outside and being the way, like with nature, connected and much more sustainable and thoughtful. It feels right. We just got taken so far the wrong direction from that. But how would you explain the word sustainability? Because it doesn't really, as we all know, have a definition, but what does it mean to you and how would you explain that?
Yeah. So I kind of have two definitions for it at this point, like a structural understanding of sustainability and a personal understanding. So as I said, the personal understanding of sustainability now is an unlearning and a return to ancestral wisdom. Structurally, I think sustainability is considering the cultural, social, and environmental impacts of how our systems currently operate and reimagining those systems in a way that centers people and the planet and culture as well. And so that's why I think it's very important to navigate our conversations with sustainability to not only include the structures that we're operating in, which I think is often feeling like so abstract and grand, it's hard for people to kind of grasp at first sight, to really make it personal about like what it in your personal journey in life connects with sustainability. So I have like two definitions.
Yeah, no, that takes me on to my next question, where I really love something you say where you talk about finding your narrative as being a sustainable activist, like finding what's true to you. And could you just explain what you mean about really finding your narrative and what that means to you?
Yeah, most definitely. So when I first entered the sustainable fashion space, to be honest, it was quite alienating for me. As much as I connected with the grounding values of female empowerment and ethical labor practices, all of that great stuff, the landscape that made up sustainable fashion, at least where I'm from, was not diverse at all. And it was often marketed as a luxury product that only a few people can afford, if we're being honest. Because I think it's very important to have raw conversations of the price point of sustainable fashion as it currently exists.
Yeah.
And so I used to question, like, okay, is there a space for me in this movement for someone that doesn't belong to the racial or socioeconomic demographics that often make up this movement? And so the more deeper I got and my blog became a bit more nuanced to feature my own personal experiences, I realized that conversations of race, class, and gender have to be a part of the sustainability conversation. And there's no monolithic understanding of what sustainability can be. The reason it's so important to have diversity in sustainability isn't to check off this like mark of like inclusion, but because there's so many different understandings of what sustainability looks like. And for me, it's become a priority of looking at sustainability from a non-consumer or capitalistic endeavor. and thinking of it of a personal practice. And so that's why I think when you make sustainability your own, it becomes so much more personable. Like, you know, for me, as I said, it became about like my connection to my homeland, to my grandparents. So that, as opposed to like this sweater that was made of like organic cotton, as great as that is, it's not going to connect in the same way.
No. And it's not authentic, and you have to find the authenticity that people will relate to. And so you speak a lot about garment workers and the injustice in that system. And currently coronavirus has been highlighting, I watched one of your recent Instagram TVs about how coronavirus has highlighted the injustice in that world. Could you speak a little bit about what it's highlighting and what still needs to be changed?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, coronavirus, in my opinion, has just exposed the cracks in the system that were always there in our fashion production.
Mm.
So when I think about how the fashion industry currently operates, like the traditional fashion industry, it's about producing as much as you can, as cheap as you can, as fast as you can. And when the whole fashion model is predicated on speed, it comes at the sacrifice of the environment, but most importantly, garment worker rights. And so within, you know, the COVID era where business is coming to a screeching halt, you have all these garment workers that are either out of work or are continuing to toil in sweatshop conditions where they don't have any social distancing practices. You know, the conditions even pre-COVID were not conducive to any health and safety concerns. So why would it be now? And a lot of garment workers around the world are not being paid the wages they're owed from big fashion brands that have the bottom lines to compensate their workers, but are not doing so. And it just goes to show how garment workers are the hearts of the fashion industry. The fashion industry literally cannot operate without them, but are compensated the least, treated the worst on the supply chain. And so I think we need a recalibration of really valuing labor and not just seeing garment workers as low skilled wage or low skilled labor, which is literally what they are considered here in LA, but as artisans, because they are artisans at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it's something that really needs to change. And I think it's incredible you use your voice in that area, because to be honest, I don't know if it's something that many people, they think of fast fashion, they think of the environment, but I don't think many people think that far into it. And you speaking about it and highlighting that really brings a different level of what's happening and how much this needs to change. I really love that you, when you talk about these things in your Instagram and on your blog, you give people call to actions, like things they can do. What is to highlight, what are some of the things they can do right now about the problems with how garment workers are treated?
Yeah. So I have two areas that I've really looked into with like garment workers as it relates to COVID. So here where I'm based in LA, I've been very active in the LA garment scene. And one concrete action folks can do right now is actually donate to a garment worker COVID relief fund. So a bit more context about the LA garment industry. The LA garment industry is literally LA's second biggest industry, and it employs over 50,000 individuals. The industry is mostly an underground informal economy, and it also has a predominantly undocumented workforce. Because the workforce is predominantly undocumented, when workers do try and speak out, they're threatened with deportation and all these different forms of workplace intimidation. And even if you're undocumented, you are entitled to the minimum wage, all the rights that any other workers would be, but because that part of their identity is weaponized, it creates this very hostile environment. And the other part I think that's important to know is that the fashion industry demands a vulnerable workforce so they can exploit them and kind of suppress their voice. And I think that's important to understand is the system has been created that way. No matter where you look in the world, you'll notice that the garment worker communities is disenfranchised in some way. And it's usually a structural issue. And so because a lot of folks are either out of work or now producing masks in sweatshops conditions, those that are out of work don't have access to unemployment and a lot of other benefits. And then those that are in work are still being paid piece rates. So in LA, they get paid per piece they make, which is not legal in terms of how much they're making. They get paid about 3 cents per piece. Think about that cost of living in LA, like that does not add up. And it doesn't add up because the average hourly wage in LA is $6. So that's in LA. It's like, please put your money towards this fund and it will go directly to garment workers. Another easier action is what's happening in Bangladesh right now. A lot of garment workers are not being paid the wages they're owed for orders they've already completed. And so there's this amazing organization, Remake, that you might be familiar with. And they're kind of like a sustainable fashion organization. So they've created a hashtag pay up campaign. So they have called out all of these big brands that had not paid up. And it's creating a culture of accountability, which is like, this is where the internet really comes in clutch, because all of these brands, a lot of them have actually paid up after following public pressure, but there's still brands that are pending. So sign that petition, post on social media, call out those brands, because in this day and age, that is so important.
Yeah, using our voice and actually making something. And I think 2020 has highlighted really just how much we may have just seen the world is running the wrong way. It's just, I think it's highlighted things we may have not noticed before, whether it's with the coronavirus to now with what we're seeing with the Black Lives Matter protests. And I think change, I'm hoping this may be a time to actually see genuine change, but I don't know what your thoughts are. Do you feel like genuine change might be on its way within the fashion industry? And what do you hope that change will look like?
Yeah, that's a great question that I think I've been reflecting on. Is like, as much as for some it might look like the world is on fire, the other part of it, I think we're in the middle of a paradigm shift. This culture of accountability in countless industries, whether that's fashion, whether that's a fight for racial justice. And it's also important to note how interconnected all of these issues are. The fashion industry is inherently racialized when you look at who's being exploited the most. And so I do think things are going to change. And what that change is going to look like is, again, this culture of accountability. Consumer demand is so incredibly important. And we're at a point in time where consumers are finally being exposed to all of these cracks. It's so explicit and in people's faces. It's like, to go back to the normal is to go back to an inherently violent form of production. I think just this rise of environmental consciousness, the connections between the environmental movement and how that relates to issues of race, like environmental racism, is becoming more explicit. So there's this consciousness and the awakening that's coming into the masses. Like, no longer is sustainability a niche issue as it was when I first started 6 years ago. You know, it was like this like small collective of folks that cared about this. And so it's really, really great to see. And I think we have to maintain this energy within the general public of challenging systems and reimagining them, whether that's defunding the police or reimagining the fashion industry. It all just speaks to the power, the people's power. So yeah, things to look forward to.
Yeah, things to look forward to. I think it's amazing. Just many more people becoming conscious and aware, where they were maybe just naive and just it wasn't even in their brain before. And I mean, I'm hoping it's making a change. And I really love when you do decide to support brands on your blog or on your Instagram, you really look at every aspect of, I mean, you explain every aspect of the brand and what you like about them. And what factors do you look for before you decide you want to be associated or work or support a brand?
Yeah, there's a few different things, and I have my own list of priorities, which can be a little different for everyone depending on who you ask. For me, given my background and current place as like a labor activist, labor is one of the most important things for me. Conditions where it's made, how workers are being compensated, etc. The next natural priority for me is the environmental impact. So are they using synthetic fibers versus natural fabrics, things like that. Because I think another thing I've come to realize is all of the environmental elements of the fashion industry goes back and affects the social dimension, right? Same communities being affected. So that's very important to me. The third element I would say is cultural sensitivity. A lot of the fashion world is obviously inspired by all these cultures, but are they doing it in a way that actually respects that culture rather than appropriating it? If it is being inspired by some community, some culture, is the money going back to that community? So those are the important things. As I grow my platform and start working with bigger brands, sometimes these lines are a lot more blurred because they're working with a lot bigger scales as opposed to small brands, where it's a lot easier to see these like issues as they pertain to like production and everything. But I think it's also seeing a company's commitment to growth and change. As easy it is for me to write off all of these big brands, we're also operating under capitalism where these brands have huge impacts, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about having a necessarily perfect track record, but what have you done when things have come to light? And so all of these questions, it's a constant vetting process, but yeah.
And it can be hard to find your way. And as you say, you need to also support. I mean, my place as a model, I have to support some of these fast fashion brands because I work for them and that's how I earn my career. But then there's also, now I'm starting these conversations. You just have to balance like how you use what you can and your voice. But I think it's amazing you really dive deep and look at all those areas. And is there any brands out there that you really feel like are doing it right now and you really love what they stand for?
Yeah, a lot of the smaller brands, I think, that have always been committed to these conversations of worker justice, racial justice, are continuing to do so. During this age of everyone kind of entering the conversation of social justice, it can be very hard to decipher who's doing it in like a performative allyship type way versus who's doing it authentically. And I think it's always going to be hard to discern, especially in the age of social media where it's like, you could post, a black tile to support Black lives, but what are you doing behind the scenes? And so I would want to shout out some of the brands that I've worked with that have always had that commitment. One of my favorite brands is Tonle. They're a zero waste brand. So they are based in Cambodia and they get like discarded, dead stock fabrics and produce them in a way that actually is zero waste in its design. So it's like a two-way zero waste, the materials they use and how they produce it. And the founder, Rachel, has always been so committed to kind of understanding her own privilege in this industry as a white woman in the West and like how that all translates in terms of producing in Cambodia. How do you center the voices of your workers, etc. Another brand I really appreciate is Agati. They are the owner and founder of this brand is a Nepali Indian woman. And she does these artisan tours through India because India has so much artisan craft based on like regional elements. And so she's just like a wizard that knows every type of material, whether it's cotton, silk, hemp, and like hand block printing and hand embroidery. So she has such a wide array of really embracing that craft element, which is kind of a form of decolonization because so much of India's craft and artisan industry was, destroyed during the time of colonization. So now we're in this time of like this renaissance of reconnecting to all this craft that was once there. So I'm a big fan of that as well.
Yeah. I've been to India and I really saw all of that craft and beauty, and it's I love that. And how would you tell people to approach fashion in a conscious way when they're looking at buying? And how would you tell people to be a conscious consumer?
Yeah, I have a friend, Hoda Katebi, who's also someone that has been a leader in the sustainable fashion space. And she said this line that really stuck with me, which is look at your closet like an art gallery. Before you buy a piece of art, you think, is this worth the investment? Do I want to look at this on my wall for the next 10 years? Does it go with the other stuff on my wall being your closet? So this idea of careful curation, looking at things as an investment piece really goes a long way. And your closet being a reflection of who you are, your identity, the same way we kind of consider art as a society. And because fashion is art at the end of the day, but capitalism has tricked us into thinking it's this disposable thing. It's a reconnection to that. So I think that's a really good metaphor to consider when making purchases.
Amazing. And how do you find the fashion you want to support? Is there resources you use, or I bet a lot of people contact you now because of the area you're in, but how did it start before that?
Yeah, so now it's a lot easier because I have folks in my inbox, which makes it a lot easier. And I always try to share that knowledge. I am currently like redesigning my website to have a shop list with all these different filter categories. But before I entered this space, I was a huge thrifter. I've been thrifting since I was a young girl with my mom. And I think thrifting really informed my way of looking at clothes. I wasn't informed by mannequins at Forever 21 necessarily when you're at a thrift store, right? You have to look at what is my personal style.
Mm.
And then it's like a treasure hunt. Like there is no visual indicators to tell you what's in or not. So you kind of have to do that work yourself. And so thrifting, I think, lends itself to this mentality of like digging deep and being like, oh, wow, and looking the seams and the fabric. So yeah, thrifting, I think, is a great exercise in all of this as well.
Amazing. And you really use your voice in so many ways. You are a incredible storyteller and photographer, and I saw a piece you did for National Geographic, I think, in Nepal, with in that on their farm, her farm, and with the matriarch society. And just can you speak a little bit and explain a bit about it and how you find these stories you want to cover?
Yeah, for sure. So that piece actually wasn't for National Geographic. National Geographic is
Oh,
the upcoming thing that I'll tell you more
oh,
about in a second.
okay.
Yeah. So that photo essay that I did was about a matriarchal society in Nepal that was kind of created in response to the patriarchy, creating a safe space for women, creating their own sustenance, having their own farm, like a really autonomous system. And so I actually was in university at that time, but there was a contact at my university that had a contact in Nepal, one of those things. And I learned about this and I was like, this embodies everything, like my sort of utopia, all these
Mm.
South Asian women that have informed a really radical relationship to what community looks like, what ownership looks like, because they're all stakeholders of this farm. There's no hierarchy of mine versus yours. The children that grow up on this farm call everyone mother because there's like this collective raising of children. Food, again, they have their own farm. And so I think there is an inherent feminine energy that kind of informs our relationship to this earth, this, idea of stewardship and the way you kind of relate to your natural environment. And so this photo essay was kind of embodiment of all of the women that make up this farm, their own personal stories of navigating a world that is inherently patriarchal. Um, and what that healing looks like, both on a personal level, a community level, and then like on an environmental level. And so that was one of my favorite pieces that I've done. My relationship to that community was just it went such a long way.
Mm.
And so I actually want to go back at some point and continue that project,
And
maybe make a short film out of it.
how long did you get to spend there? Did they really bring you in? Did you live with them and experience the culture like that, or how did it
Yeah,
work?
I was there for a little over a month and I was living on the farm with
Oh wow.
them. Yeah. So completely there, like 24 hours a day. It's like a 3 hour, 2 hour hike from like the base of the mountain because it's like up
Oh
in the
wow.
foothills of the Himalayas. And so yeah, it was great and one of my favorite experiences of this life so far.
Oh wow. Yeah, that has to be incredible. And you were going to tell me more about your plans with National Geographic.
Yes. So with National Geographic, I actually was named one of their fellows this year. So they have a program. It's kind of like a digital storyteller fellowship, you
Okay.
can say. But you pick a project and propose it in a country of your choice. And so I actually got it to go to India for 1 year and document the social and environmental impacts of India's fashion supply chain, which is like very on par with
Mm.
everything that I've been saying so far. I would have been there honestly like right now, but COVID happened. So it will
Yeah.
be sometime in 2021. But it just gives me more time to kind of really think about the stories I want to
Mm.
follow. And I'm going to do everything from cotton farmers to garment workers, artisans, to the end of life textile waste. So it's going to be like the whole fashion
Wow.
loop. And in addition to kind of documenting the issues that are in the industry, it's also like solutions journalism. So what are the solutions that are being created? What is that ancestral
Yeah.
knowledge that we could kind of reclaim?
It'll be quite interesting to be going there after COVID and
Yeah.
seeing the impacts from that, or seeing maybe how things, to talk to people and seeing what the changes are, if any, actually does go into effect after what people say they are feeling and seeing now. And it'll be quite an interesting time, I'm sure. And will you
Most
plan to, will it be just photographs, or will it be you making a documentary type of thing out of it? Or I'm be so excited to see it.
Yeah. So at the moment, my plan is to do primarily written articles and photo, but as someone that loves multimedia journalism, I'm sure it'll spill into like short videos, maybe like audio too. But I'm going to be actively sharing on social media. So in addition to maybe having a more curated end product like a
Yeah.
documentary, it's also kind of taking everyone on that journey, like
Yeah.
day-to-day
Yeah.
documentations of this experience. So yeah, it'll be definitely multimedia, but I think more so photo.
Mm. And I think now people are really getting their information just following day to day. They really relate to that more, like watching your Instagram day to day and seeing and learning along the way with you. I think
Mhm.
people respond to that a lot. Um, you are so knowledgeable in so many areas, and I think a lot of people sometimes get like stumped as to where to look to learn about this kind of stuff. What are some of your resources you look to keep learning and educating yourself in these areas of fashion and sustainability?
Yeah, there's a lot of great organizations out there that have specializations in like the environmental side or the labor side. On the labor end, I love to follow two organizations, one being Fashion Revolution, which was actually created after the Rana Plaza factory collapse. They document a lot of the updates and things like that within the fashion labor landscape. Can you hear me okay? Someone is chaining
Yeah,
it. So,
I
okay.
can hear you. I can hear you.
Great. And then the other one is Clean Clothes Campaign. They also document this landscape. In terms of the environmental side and the cultural side, another organization that I love is the Slow Factory.
Okay.
They kind of follow the fashion industry, but more so the environmental movement at large through a lens of colonialism. And so that has informed my work a lot.
Mm.
Um, yeah, so those are the three that come to mind. But honestly, Instagram, just follow some of those
Yeah,
hashtags, sustainable fashion. There's so much
yeah,
knowledge out there. Right.
yeah. No, there's so much knowledge. Yeah, and I really love EcoAid. You write a lot for them too. I've seen some of your articles on there, and I feel like that's a great tool to learn from as well. Um, and please tell, well, actually, lastly, is there anything you would like to leave, a piece of advice to people, or any last, like, leaving word you would like people to leave with people right now?
Yeah, I think we are in such a powerful time of shifts and changes. And as beautiful as it could be, it could also be incredibly overwhelming. I think a lot
Mhm.
of folks are stepping into a lot of knowledge that they weren't aware of before, whether that's racial justice, environmental, all of those things. And so I would say all of us have the responsibility to unlearn and continue learning.
Mhm.
And we really have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable at this point in
Yeah.
time. Like there's so much that we don't know. And I think the cornerstone of being a good ally is kind of embracing that discomfort and the fact that we will be wrong at some point. So have grace for yourself and your community, but hold yourself up to that standard of continuing this work. It's so incredibly important.
Yeah, incredibly important. And I like the word unlearn because I think people don't realize how set in their ways or unconscious they were of some of the things. I mean, all of us are accountable for that. So I like the word unlearn. I think that's a powerful one as well to highlight. Could you tell people where to find you? What's your blog and your Instagram and where they can find you?
Yes. So my blog is adimay.com, adimay.com. And you can find me on all social channels at Aditi Mayer. That's spelled ADITIMAYER.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Aditi. It was incredible. I could talk to you all day. And yeah, you're incredible and very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye.
Bye.